You're listening to the Decidedly podcast with Smith and Shawn Smith. Our mission is to help business owners like you defeat bad decision-making so you can improve your health, wealth, and relationships. We do this by digging deep into the stories and expertise of our guests and distilling their knowledge into actionable wisdom for you to carry into your life and business. If you're new to the show, welcome. Be sure to hit the subscribe button so you won't miss out on any of our weekly episodes. If you prefer to watch this week's episode, head on over to YouTube for the full video. Now, let's get into this week's episode and defeat bad decision-making in your life and business.
So I have a question for you. What lessons do you remember learning about relationship with money as you were growing up?
Like in general or like in school or in family?
In family.
Yeah, I was going to say in school, I'm not sure what I did learn. I learned how to count coins.
Oh, there you go. Well, school. That's helpful.
Yeah. I might have already covered that before I got to kindergarten.
I remember going on a trip with my dad years ago. We went to Europe and he had not learned the money. I was just a kid.
The European money.
He had not learned the European money. He knew the American money. And I remember us going somewhere and he just held out a handful of coins to some vendor and let the guy kind of pick through his hand and pull out what he needed.
That's trusting.
Well, that's trusting. We're dumb. One or the other.
One or the other. Yeah.
No, but my question is, what do you remember learning about relationship with money as you were growing up?
Yeah, I learned a lot. One of the things I remember distinctly, like probably earliest memories about money, was they had a program at the elementary school with a local bank, Omni American Bank.
All right.
And they would let you set up a savings account for your child. Right. And so in kindergarten, it was like every Friday they were at the school. And so you would take me to school on Fridays and you would deposit some money with me. And sometimes I might have had birthday money or allowance money or money I got from chores or whatever. And I would go put it into this account. And so you taught me like about saving then. I was too young to even ask like, why am I going to get this money? Yeah. It's funny because I actually spent that money in college.
Yeah. Wow.
So it took that long for me to ever even touch it. But you taught me about saving. We had when we wanted something, y'all didn't typically, you and mom didn't typically just buy us what we asked for. And we almost never asked for something that you could not afford. Right. Like we would ask for like a pony or something. It was like, I want that new DVD or whatever, new toy. And you would make us earn it like in whatever way we were capable of at 7 years old, and save up and then track our progress and give us ways to earn money.
Well, I think that one of the parents' roles is to appropriately increase freedom as kids get older. And one of the ways to do that is to connect money to that, because money in a sense is freedom. If I give you money to say, hey, this is your money, you spend it however you want, that's a kind of freedom, right? If I give you money but don't give you control over it, then what was the point?
Yeah.
And so I think there are different levels of that, right? And so there's allowance, and sometimes people debate on, should you give a kid an allowance and how much should it be? And we always did allowances. And
there's people that say you should not give allowances.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
my perspective was, I go out and earn money, but I think there are responsibilities or jobs that you have at home.
Yeah.
Right? You got to feed the dog. You got to make your bed. You got to clean your room. Take care of the dog, whatever it is. And that there's going to be some money that you get on a weekly basis, and that amount of money increases as you get older, right?
Yeah.
So we did
that.
Right.
It was like, I think it was 1 quarter for every how old we were.
Yeah, it wasn't a lot.
It was like you're 10 years old, you get 10 quarters. So I was like, $2.50.
Right. It's not a ton, right? And that would give you the freedom for those small little things. I want some candy at the checkout store or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
But then there was always opportunity for additional earnings.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a project you can do, or you can do this and earn some additional money. And so there was always that availability. And so we always did that. But then there's also the parent's role in responsibility with, right? And so one of the things that we would do is, I'm not a big gambler. I know some people do it as a hobby or sport. They really enjoy gambling. Some people have a problem with it. I've never had that be a problem in my life. It wasn't something I enjoyed. And so I was trying to instill that philosophy with you. And so I would give you opportunities if you earned money, or if you got in trouble and had some punishment, to do double or nothing.
Oh, those were the worst. Well, I will say first, the allowance that you gave was never just given, and it wasn't just for doing chores. Like, there were chores that were unpaid, that were expected.
Mm-hmm.
It was more or less like, I don't want to say optional chores, but chores that either you would have had to have done or you would have paid someone to do. It wasn't like taking out the trash or something. Something that was cleaning my room. It wasn't that.
Well, that's why it was nominal. There's a nominal amount you get just for the things that were expected.
Which I thought that seemed reasonable. But it wasn't like, I'm going to just give you $10 a week for whatever, for no good reason.
No, there was an expectation.
Yeah, there were times where I did not do it and didn't get my money.
Well, I was saying that there is the appropriate increase in freedom that parents should have, that increasing responsibility. And I give you increases responsibility over your life.
Yes.
How you kept your room, how you dressed, how you did your hair, those types of things. And then other responsibilities about whether it was gambling or how you spent money.
The double or nothing.
Right. The double or nothing.
Yeah. You taught me that. Was a money lesson that I really needed, because I think I could have easily developed a gambling problem. You
could have. My
personality lends itself to
it does
that negative pathway in life.
It does.
And you would, whether it was like a chore situation, or you would a lot of times you'd bet me, like if we were going to play basketball game in the backyard or pool, be like, okay, well, you have to clean the house for 15 minutes, or I'll give you $5 or something.
Right.
Which was like a pretty good deal.
That is a good deal. Yeah.
I realized now, because I'm thinking like, man, that's a $20 an hour.
You always do that. You're like, oh, that's $20 an hour.
That's pretty fair.
You'd always take the deal, and then you'd lose on the basketball.
Yeah. I was like, I can't go get a job for $20 an hour, so I'll take this. I'll play pool. And I realized that you were willing to pay such an hourly rate because you weren't ever going to lose.
No, you weren't going to.
I never won.
No.
So I never got the money. And then I would have 15 minutes of cleaning the house. And then you'd say, do you want to double or nothing?
Right.
Okay. So either 15 minutes of cleaning the house, or no money, no cleaning the house.
Right.
And I lose.
I always loved your optimism, though.
And then double or nothing.
Yeah.
I remember one time, I'm pretty sure it was 4 hours at least.
You parlayed 15 minutes into 4 hours one time.
Yeah. Maybe more than once.
Yeah.
But you would always tell me you should never gamble. Like, you would do that. And then tell me after I got signed up for an hour cleaning the house, you'd tell me you should never gamble.
This is why you don't gamble.
Yeah, you don't ever gamble with real money. And I was like, okay.
Did that stick?
Yeah, I've never gambled.
Yeah.
I've actually gambled once.
Yeah,
I went to WinStar Casino when I was like 19, and but I was so afraid because you had always told me don't gamble, and what could I have really lost at 19 years old? I didn't even have any money. But when you go to WinStar for the first time ever, they give you like a credit of $50 or something.
Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah, they're trying to get you hooked.
Right. The first taste is free. Yeah.
So they give you a credit, and I lost all that credit. I didn't win anything. And I was like, okay, well, done now. So I didn't even lose any of my money.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah.
I remember one of the things that we did is that you would save up, and that before you were allowed to drive, you had to deposit with me the deductible on your auto insurance.
I don't remember that at all.
Yeah. We, you had to, I think the
funny.
deductible was
That's
$500.
hilarious, actually.
Yeah, you don't remember that? So yeah, because I knew that was going to get hit.
Yeah.
Because I had been a kid.
Fair enough.
I had been a teenage male driver. I knew.
Fair enough. You were right, by the way.
Oh, yeah. I remember one time.
You got hit early. You got hit like within a week of me having my license.
There was one time you wrecked your truck, took it to the shop.
Don't tell this story. It's horrible.
And wrecked it on the way home from the shop.
Yep.
Yeah.
I did do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was pretty bad. So you made me deposit it.
Yeah. Yeah. You had to have that on deposit with me because I know I knew you were going to hit
That's
it.
funny. I don't remember that at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's got to be a little bit of a challenge with kids because you can teach them about earning money, right? Before they're old enough to work outside of the house, you can have them work inside the house. Uh-huh. Once they're old enough to work outside of the house, then, it's easier to say, hey, you should probably go get a summer job or something. You can teach them about saving, which you did. Yeah, I'd save up for toys I wanted, save up for things I wanted. That was true from little kid to, all the way through high school. You could teach me about investing. You bought, 1 year for our birthday, I know this is true for me in summer. I don't know if you did this for Sophie, but you let me buy a stock that I chose.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
We did that. So that was purposeful. And the idea was to buy one share of stock or two, depending on the price.
It was not
I think you had a couple $100. But I wanted you to buy a stock that you had an interest in. Mm-hmm. So I wanted you to buy, I think you bought Nike.
It was Nike.
Yeah. But I think we had looked at McDonald's, we had looked at Nike, we had looked at EA Sports. There were a few different ones that were really relevant to you. And the idea wasn't necessarily that it was a great investment or not.
Yeah, who cared, really?
It turned out to be a good investment. But that you would pay attention to it. Mm-hmm. And you would begin to notice your relationship with that company. And then we talked about the difference between a good company, a good product, and a good stock. And that they can have a good product, you can like the product. Does that mean it's a good company? Well, then we talked about what a good company likes. And then even if it's a good product and a good company, does that mean it's a good stock based on the price? And so we talked about price.
I remember, ratios I always think of you, you told me a story of a client who you had this conversation with. Good product, good company, good stock. She really wanted to buy Krispy Kreme stock.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I remember
because she ate the donuts all the time.
She thought they were great. Yeah.
And I think of Krispy Kreme all the time when I think of that or have that conversation with a client.
Yeah. And so I explained to her that, it's a great product. Sure. Yeah. And then I talked to her about the company but you look at the price, and that doesn't, just because you love the donuts doesn't mean the stock is good at that price. And that's
so taught about investing by buying the stock, taught about saving by helping me save for a toy or opening an account like at Omni, taught me about earning money by having chores and allowance.
Right.
How do you teach kid about spending?
So one of the things that we did was, as I was saying, that you've got to have money to be able to learn that lesson. Because it's got to be your money that you've earned, and that there's got to be some pain in loss, right?
Yeah, really hard for me to learn about spending with mom and dad's money.
Right. If I just give you the money, you'll just go blow it on whatever, and it won't matter. The lesson will not stick, right? So it had to be some of your money. And so that's the purpose of the allowance, is that you have control. And so really important for you to have that responsibility for good and bad decision making on the spending. And so one of the things that we did was to look at anytime we'd go on a vacation, at the beginning of that vacation, you would get an amount of money. Then not part of your allowance, you didn't have to earn it. It was just, hey, we're at Disney World. Here's $100. Yeah,
because I'm going to ask for stupid toys at the gift shop anyway.
Right. Right. And so if we would go somewhere, I would just solve that problem up front and say, here's for you. You can spend this however you want. Now, know that I'm going to buy your lunch. Yeah, you don't have to spend it all, but spend it however you want. And so one of the things that we talked about is don't buy the first thing you see. Like shop around. If you see this little trinket, there's going to be another one next street over. You're going to see it again. Save those at the end of the day. You might find something better. You don't want to have spent it and then regret because you saw something you'd rather have. And so we would give you that control to spend that however you want it. And sometimes we just had to hold our tongue and go, oh, I can't believe he's buying the stupid pirate hat, for this money or whatever it was.
It's funny. I remember distinctly you discouraging certain purchases.
Yes.
And you were always right about those.
I didn't prevent them, by the way.
No, you would let me do it. But I remember two. One was a stuffed buffalo, like stuffed animal. I don't remember where we were.
You bought it?
I bought it. Stuffed buffalo. Now, to tell you how right you were to discourage it, we did not go to Yellowstone as a family. We didn't go anywhere where there were buffalo.
Okay. All right.
So I don't remember where this was, but it was definitely somewhere where there were no buffaloes.
Okay. All right.
Okay. So it wasn't sentimental about remember when we saw that buffalo and then you got the stuffed animal buffalo later that day? Had nothing to do with it. And then I bought a Davy Crockett raccoon hat from the Alamo gift shop in San Antonio.
I do remember you doing that.
I remember that one. I don't remember you discouraging it because it was such a stupid purchase. More so you were discouraging it because it was I
may have been just laughing at you.
You're dude, you're not going to wear that.
Knowing that the lesson, where are you going to wear that? You're going to wear this today in the gift shop and then you're not even wearing it. That's not, you're taking it off.
And that's what happened. Yeah. But I kept those all the way through college.
Oh, you did?
Oh, yeah. Because I was oh my gosh, I have to keep this.
Right.
This stupid thing I got, now I have to keep it. And then, I bought it when I'm 8. I'm I'm 9 now. I've never used this. I've never played with this buffalo. I've never worn this raccoon hat. But I can't get rid of it. I spent my money on it. I spent it. And then because I got the irony is because I got no utility out of them, I felt like I had to keep them.
Yeah, maybe utility is on its way. You thought maybe
it's the sunk cost fallacy applied to these stupid gifts. Because there were plenty of things I got rid of after having thoroughly enjoyed them for years, and I felt, get rid of it. I'm done. I played with it for 5 years. I haven't played with it since 2 summers ago.
Right,
I'll get rid of it. But this thing I've never even touched is collecting dust. I can't get rid of that.
Right.
I can't get rid of that. Then it would have been a waste.
Right, yeah. Then it would have been a dumb purchase. You're sort of justifying your purchase by doing that. So that was one of the things we did. The other thing is, and you actually embraced this more than I thought you would, but I really encouraged you to buy your first car. And I think you sort of took it as a badge of honor.
Well, yeah, because you told me from when I was little that was what I was expected.
Mm-hmm.
So, before I could even earn money, you were you're going to have to buy your first car. I was okay. I didn't think anything. I didn't know how much a car costs. I just was all right, well, that's what I got to do. And you told me that's what you did for yourself.
Uh-huh.
You had to buy your own first car. So I was looking forward to the day that I would buy my first car, and I would dream, what's my first car going to be? What can I? And of course, I couldn't dream big. I had to dream of a raggedy old beat up vehicle because I knew that that's all I could really afford. I'm not going to get a brand new Corvette.
To be fair, I didn't know I was buying my first car. I got my first car for my 15th birthday or so. And then my dad told me as I was, admiring this new car that I got, that it wasn't a new car. It was a piece of junk. It cost $900. Let me just say that. My first car was $900. And my dad explained to me that he had cleaned out my savings account to buy it. I'm oh, so wait, I bought this car. Now, in hindsight, I'm glad he did it that way. I wasn't real thrilled at the time, but it gave me a source of pride and ownership and connection to that purchase. It really taught me that there was a value of the money. I'm going to take care of this piece of junk truck. And I did. And I think you took care of your car differently than if it would just been handed to you.
For sure, yeah. I was thrilled that I got to buy my own vehicle. And there were kids, by that time I was going to a private high school, right? Uh-huh. So there were kids there with brand new luxury cars.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a kid I remember distinctly who had a brand new BMW, wrecked it, and his parents asked him, would you like another BMW or a Porsche?
Wow.
A brand new one. So I wasn't jealous. I was like, I got to buy this. Like,
oh yeah.
This is
I roomed with a guy in college that came from a pretty wealthy family. And in college, so I rented a room in his condo that he owned. He owned this condo. And so I rented a room. And in the garage, he had a Porsche. It was a new Porsche in college. And he had a big, just like lifted Jeep.
Mm-hmm.
And he also had a Ninja motorcycle. Right. Three. Right. And meanwhile, I was driving a pretty old beat up BMW that did not have air conditioning. Right? It had a muffler that kept falling off. I mean, it was but it taught me, I saw him not care about how he spent his money. Like he didn't have a relationship to money that I did. And so I think there's some value early on in having a stake in the game. Even if a kid can't buy their own car completely, having some money invested in it, having some money on deposit for the deductible that's likely to happen.
Did he treat his things differently?
I just don't think he valued them like I did.
Well, how do you know that?
He just didn't seem to care. I mean, he was proud of them. He wanted to show them off to you, but it wasn't like he bought it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I think also another thing you look at when you look at that relationship is looking at, I remember having a discussion with one of your sisters about the difference between, we were at a restaurant and I remember the waitress kind of stopping and listening and then complimenting. She was like, oh, this is interesting. I didn't know any of this. I was explaining the difference because we were paying the bill and I put down my American Express card. And so I started explaining to her the difference between a charge card, Express card that you have to pay at the end of the month. You pay everything you've charged, you've got to pay so that there's no credit, versus a credit card where you're borrowing money, versus a debit card where it's coming right out of your account. And the differences in those, why they existed, why you would want to use one over the other, and just having that discussion over lunch one time. And so I think looking for those opportunities is important because you want that education to be incremental. And if you don't do it, then you have to try and make up time, and then it becomes overly burdensome to say, well, let's go to this class or let's read this book or whatever it is. And it's kind of, you're dumping all of this information on a person at once, and it can get, I think,
then people who are adults who have not learned as a kid or didn't have the fortunate ability to have those lessons imbued upon them, they do get overwhelmed. They're like, I just don't know anything. I don't know what to do. And give up, or don't even try budgeting or overdo it and overcorrect and become obsessive about the things that they can control with their money to an unhealthy degree. So I felt really fortunate that I always seemed like I had learned the lessons that I needed. Some lessons you can't learn until you're actually living life. I mean, you can learn how to budget in a small way, but then you go out there and get your first job and it's definitely different, but the principles are the same as when I was budgeting my little $50 allowance at Disney World, the concept of don't blow it all up front, be patient with your money, spend it on things you really care about, try to really determine if this is going to be something that matters to you in the future or not. Earn your money. Don't just spend it like it's going to come in freely. So all those things, even when they're small, like they apply to adult problems. And it seems like people who didn't have those small opportunities as kids they get overwhelmed because the adult problems are presented as adult problems with the adult problem complexity. And they feel like I've got to learn all of the complexity of this instead of learning it in its simple form as a kid, right? Like it's like if I'm learning how to, if I go straight to engineering school and I was never encouraged to like play with Legos. Like, you know what I mean? Like you, oh my gosh, I got to start completely all the way from zero.
Right.
But I'm skipping the Legos because no one's going to take you through the Legos.
I never play with Tinker Toys or Lego Logs or something.
Yeah. And so I feel like that still helps me a lot.
Well, I think, in some cases that's true because the support system is then gone. Right. And so there is that added pressure. If you're an adult and you don't know, how to spend, you don't know how to access credit, you don't know how to save, then your parents aren't there anymore. You are all on your own, and so it's fraught with risk and danger.
Yeah. Some people were taught, the lesson they were taught were basically to just avoid certain things. Like,
what do you mean?
Like some people, adults who just straight up don't invest money.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's like a intentional thing. They do have the means to do it. It's not that they're poor. They're like, I'm not doing that. And that's bad. It's a scam.
Well, that's really interesting.
The problem is their kids end up becoming there. It's like, well, my dad just told me to avoid this, so I'll avoid this.
You learn,
same with credit cards.
You learn so much, whether it's intentional or not, from watching your parents' relationship to money. And that's observable. So everything we do as parents is observable. And so I was real careful to make sure that there was a positive relationship with money, that we saw money as a tool that you can use. I remember seeing older clients come in to my office, and there's a certain relationship that older clients have with money. And when I say older, I'm talking about clients who are in their 80s.
Okay.
They are not as open in talking to their kids about money.
Yeah.
They tend to be fearful of banks. They will scatter money around and over diversify. They will not access the equity market as readily. And one of the reasons is you look at who raised them. So who raised somebody who was born in the 30s or early 40s is people that went through the Depression. And those parents talked about money in whispers at night when the kids were asleep because there wasn't enough of it. It was scarce. There had been, you couldn't trust the banks. You couldn't trust the market. And so there was a very different relationship with money. And so that still carried forward to those people that come in my office who are in their 80s. And so they don't talk to their children about money. You probably see this all the time. If the grandparent who's in their 80s, let's say, says, "Oh, I'll help with education, for this grandchild, for this great grandchild." That's about as far as it goes.
Yeah.
They don't ever say, "Here's the amount. Here's what I'll do." It doesn't get explicit.
Yeah, here's what I'll cover.
Here's what I'll cover. Here's what I won't. Here's it, because they are not comfortable talking about funds, talking about money. They won't broadcast a gift. They won't say, "I'm going to give you this amount at the end of the year." It just kind of shows up. And so I think fortunately now that has opened up. I see people be a lot more comfortable talking about money than older generations. And I think that's super positive. Let me ask you a question. What do you wish you had learned that maybe you didn't? Is there a lesson that you sort of had to learn maybe the hard way, or learn as an adult or as a financial advisor that you didn't pick up as a kid?
I don't know if I was capable of learning this as a kid, but I'm not sure that I didn't know until I was an adult how much emotions play a role in money decisions. So I didn't realize that what was happening when I was blowing my money on a stupid gift is that I was letting myself make a decision when I was really excited. right? Like I didn't know that. Now, I don't know if I could have known that at 8 years old, even if you told me, but that definitely is something I realized later was, oh, I am putting myself in a position. Typically it was making emotional decisions at positive emotion, uplifting emotions. I wasn't a lot of opportunities for me as a kid to make depressed money decisions or sad or fearful money decisions.
Right.
But I would make, I would spend a lot of money on something that I didn't really need that was exciting to me at the time.
Yeah, that's pretty normal for a kid, the kind of the immaturity.
It is. But, that's something that I'm a lot more aware of now. And so I notice that when it's happening or when the potential is
my
there.
dad did some things in sort of my education about money. He did, one of the things was there was a lot of freedom with money, but that caused me to burn my hand on the stove a few times. I mean, in other words, I'd make mistakes that my dad could have prevented, but he didn't. But I think it worked out well. So I remember one time there was a girl, and it's like, this was like middle school or something, and she was having a birthday party. So I said, I want to buy her a gift, a birthday gift. And so we go to the mall. He takes me to the mall, and I go and I buy this piece of jewelry that was kind of expensive for me as a sixth grader or seventh grader, whatever it was. And my dad said, "Oh, do you like this girl?" And I was like, No, she's just a girl in my class. Like, I don't like her.
Okay.
And I didn't. I mean, she was just a girl in my class. And he was like, okay. And he let me do it. And so I bought this girl that like barely knew me. I don't even know why I was invited to the party. And I bought her this really nice piece of jewelry. And afterwards, I remember going, that was dumb.
Yeah.
Like, why did I?
How long afterwards? Like immediately?
Like almost immediately. I'm like almost like leaving the party. Like immediately. Like, why did I do that? There was another thing that he did that I thought was interesting. And that was, or not interesting, I thought was ultimately helpful. In my first couple years of college, when I was getting financial support, now that stopped after those 2 years, but he said, here's what I've committed to this semester of college. And he would write me the check and slide it over to me and go, there you go. He goes, now you make the decision. You can live in a really nice place and eat, rice and beans, or you can go out to dinner and eat nice and live in a less nice place. He goes, I don't care. I'm not involved. Here's the check. Make your own decisions. And so I took that and I thought, oh, that's a good lesson. And I sort of did that when your sister got married, because I had a friend who had 3 daughters that got married. Mm-hmm. And so I was asking him advice. I said, we got this wedding and what's it cost? Blah, blah, blah. And he goes, Shawn, I learned a lesson. He goes, when my first daughter, the oldest daughter, got married, we didn't have a budget. And so I learned that lesson the hard way, that you need to have a budget and you need to set a target on how much you're willing to spend. I said, that makes a lot of sense. And my wife and my daughter blew right through that budget like it was standing still, because they did not, I might as well not even have the budget. It did not matter. So I got smart the next time is the first time I didn't have a budget. And so they just spent like drunken sailors. The second time I had a budget, but it didn't hold. So the first time he didn't have a budget, the second time he did have a budget. And the third time he had a budget, he wrote the check, gave it to his daughter and said, there it is. There's the amount. Don't come to me for any more. That's the amount.
Yeah.
If you underspend, you can keep the difference, but there is no more. And so that's the approach that I take. And I think it worked really well. I think that's a smart approach.
Yeah.
Do you see your clients interacting with their kids that same way and sort of setting aside fixed amounts of dollars, or do you ever see problems?
Well, that's the advice that I give, because I learned that from you is, when you have whatever it is, whether you want to buy a house for your kid or you want to pay for their wedding or you want to pay for college, is let them know what the ceiling is. and maybe there are families that it doesn't matter where the kid goes to school, and it doesn't matter if they get a scholarship, parents are going to pay for everything. Yeah. And they're prepared and willing to pay for all the way through a PhD, if they want. Okay, but that's not most families. What most families do, though, is they approach it like they're the family that can pay for any school all the way through a PhD.
Yes.
They go, well, they don't talk about money with their kid. And they just start paying the bills, and they realize about halfway through sophomore year, oh crap, Duke is pretty expensive. And then that kid, they don't ask the kid what they're going to do after they graduate. And one day, at the graduation party, they say, I just got into grad school at Vanderbilt. And they go, we I don't know if we can really afford that.
Yeah.
And then it's a big problem. So you got to be able to set the ceiling. And then also, if you set the ceiling and walk away, then you are probably going to be less likely to micromanage these life decisions that your child is making. If you're budgeting, if you're sitting there involved in every single expense of the wedding, then now you're bringing your values to the table on whether or not we should have these flowers or those flowers.
Yeah.
And that should be your daughter's choice, right?
Right.
But you're not going to be able to help but to bring your values to the table, because you're evaluating this as a decision about flowers instead of just how much money can I afford to give you, right? So when people take that advice, they are always happy with the outcome, and they always tell me that was good advice.
They set a budget advice, is it? Yeah.
Not everyone takes that advice.
That's
a lot of times they don't. It's funny. I mean, they ask me about it as their professional advisor. I give them the advice and they don't do it. Not everyone does it. And there's one that I remember distinctly where a client had two daughters getting married in the same year. Now, this client really probably couldn't have really afforded to pay for one of these daughters to have a wedding that was nice, Yeah. But how am I going to tell him no? I mean, I tell him, but I'm not really expecting him to not pay for their wedding. Okay. I just tell him this is tight. Things are tight. It's going to hurt.
Yeah.
You're not even on track for retirement, but you're probably going to do it anyway. And they did. Enough, yeah. And I said, what you ought to do. I'm not going to tell you don't do it. I've told you the impact of doing it. What I do want is for you to stay within a budget. Let's set a budget. They didn't do that. The daughter bought a wedding dress. Mom said, you're not going to like that wedding dress. Don't buy that wedding dress. It doesn't fit you right. You don't love it. Whatever. She buys the wedding dress anyway. 2 weeks later, she says, you're right, Mom. I'm not going to wear that wedding dress. It doesn't look good on me. Let me get a new wedding dress. Okay. Bought 2 wedding dresses.
No.
And I'm not talking, these were like $7,000 wedding dresses. These were not like a regular wedding dress is expensive.
Yeah.
$2,000 is a lot for a dress. No, these were high-end wedding dresses. So they spent close to $15,000 on wedding dresses, plural. Because daughter was conditioned to believe the money's endless and it doesn't matter. And it doesn't hurt my parents at all. She doesn't know that they're struggling to be ready for retirement. Mm-hmm. She doesn't know that they have a maximum amount that they're willing to spend. Why? Because they actually don't have a maximum amount that they're willing to spend, because they didn't even set a maximum amount for themselves, much less communicate it to her.
Right.
It doesn't hurt her at all to waste $7,000 on a wedding dress.
Right.
She feels no pain. She doesn't have to now decide to not get flowers or not get catering or not do alcohol or have a cheaper venue. No, she just went about with the rest of the planning. So when people do that, it definitely works. They don't always do it. And I'm not sure what the struggle is. I don't know psychologically why that's not an obvious choice for people.
Yeah, that's interesting. A lot of times there's a lot of emotion that goes along in those large purchases if they're for kids, because there is, I want to look good in the mind of my kid. I want to look good to my friends. I don't want to disappoint my kid. I want my kid to have a certain experience in college, or, I have a friend of mine that grew up in a wealthy family, but he wasn't particularly. And so now he's an adult and he's trying to provide for his kids the way that he was provided for. And it was kind of what you were talking about. The kid's going to go to Duke, then they're going to go to Vanderbilt. And I remember talking with him, and it was just smoke and mirrors on trying to contort his financial life to be able to afford that. Yeah. And I could never get him to come off of it.
Well, I think that's a bigger issue, is that people tend to, I think we all overinflate the value of our unique experience or life lesson. And we undervalue the importance or the benefit of life lessons that we did not learn. Okay. You know who I'm talking about, uncle who is in the military. Uh-huh. Well, you notice that the men in his children and his stepchildren, the men, they all go to the military.
Yeah, right.
As soon as someone starts losing direction in life, he swoops in, whether they're in his direct family tree or not, and starts to say, hey, you need to be thinking about the military. Right. Okay. Because that's his life lesson. His story is, my life was dramatically improved by going into the military. I became a new man. I learned all these things. I gained discipline. I got physically fit. Mm-hmm. It's how I continued still to this day to provide for myself. Right. Okay. I'm not saying you're wrong, but that's the path he sees.
Yeah.
How most people, I followed the path that you said. Oh, go to A&M, become a financial advisor. All right.
Right. Which is the way to go. Right.
All right.
It's worked out.
It's worked out. I'm not saying you're wrong, but there's other paths.
What?
Yeah, there's other way. Other people do other things.
No kidding.
So I think we overinflate, I'm in a fraternity. Well, my son's got to be in a fraternity. Not only does he have to be in a fraternity, he's got to be my fraternity.
Right.
I went to TCU. He's got to go to TCU too. Mm-hmm. And the problem with that, the logical problem is, there are other life lessons to learn. There are other ways to learn the life lessons you learned. So just because your child did not have the exact experience that you had does not mean they won't learn those lessons.
Right.
And 3, the method by which you learned those lessons has changed.
Yeah.
Okay. So you went and learned, you had this particular pathway, going to this school, going to this, working at this company, being in that fraternity, joining that club, playing that sport, but you did it 30 years ago.
Right.
Everything about those institutions was different. It is not a guarantee that your son or daughter is going to go learn the exact same lessons you learned from those same institutions.
Even if they have the same path. Yeah.
Even if they go down the same path, because things are different.
I think when you look at what lessons do I want to impart, you sort of back up. A lot of times people get caught up in the tactical. It's just like with investing. People get caught up in this stock or that stock or this fund or that fund or whatever. And you roll it back and you say, well, what overarching lesson am I trying to teach here? And for me, it was one of personal responsibility. In other words, how do you roll out an increasing amount of appropriate freedom to make your own decisions with money, and have the ownership and consequences there? In other words, that you have personal attachment to that. You've earned it. You have the consequences of making good or bad decisions, and give you the freedom to make good and bad decisions. And so those were the tactics of sort of teaching personal responsibility, is having you have ownership and having you have a responsibility in the outcome and in the pain and reward in that outcome. And then when you got older, then you could look at the tactics. Here's how you ought to accumulate money. Here's compound interest. Here's investing. Here's savings. Here's how you spend. Here's how you bargain shop. Here's how you evaluate. Here's how you use coupons. Those types of things. How do you make that resilient? In other words, protection planning in place. Well, you make sure you've got money for repairs. Make sure you've got money for the deductible on auto. You make sure you've got gas money. How do you make sure that once you've made that decision, it's resilient.
Yeah. Right? I think that's a great way to summarize everything that you did teach my sisters and me, which is progressively gave us more freedom in the areas of life that were important for us to gain discipline, right? You gave us progressively more freedom over the food we eat. You gave us progressively more freedom over the clothes that we wore, and you gave us more freedom over what we did with our time, where we went and where we traveled, and
how you cut your hair,
how we cut our hair, and our money. And so by the time we have ultimate freedom,
and by the way, you made dumb decisions in all of those as predicted. That's not a knock on you. Any kid's going to make dumb decisions on those. And I think once you say, I'm going to let you wear your whatever clothes you want, I've got to be cool with letting you wear whatever clothes you want.
And, it made it probably more difficult for you in the moment to do that. It would have been easier for you to say, no, this is what you're going to do. I'm making the decision. Follow me. It would have been easier for you to not, in the moment, not teach us to have this freedom, because it required your discipline to have us sometimes have a consequence that you had to clean up. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. But I think you have to, I don't have adult children. I don't even have young children. But from what I've observed in helping families make money decisions is that you sort of do have to pick between one of two pathways.
Okay.
You either have to have the discipline to teach your children life choices, like freedom and good decision making with money as a child, or you have to be prepared for them to do to
not have learned those lessons.
To not have learned those lessons. And if they have not learned those lessons, there's generally one of two paths. A lot of the time.
Okay.
One is, I need you to pay up. You didn't teach me how this shit works.
Yeah.
You're gonna
those
help
bills
pay
get
me up.
bigger as you go.
And they get bigger as you age. Yeah. And I have some clients who are in their 80s taking care of their children in their 60s.
What?
Children are retirement age and mom's taking care of them.
Oh.
Or you say, I'm not picking up that big bill. I either can't afford it or
and now you're the asshole.
And now you're the jerk, because even if the adult child cannot consciously make sense of this reality, they know somewhere within them that they were shortchanged. Like they didn't learn the things that they should have learned. And they resent mom and dad for not teaching them that. Mm-hmm. And that comes out as entitlement. But in a way, they were entitled to something that they're not getting. They're not entitled to you buying them a house when they're 55. Right. They were entitled to learning how to make good decisions when they were a child, being prepared for adulthood so they're not in this place to begin with. So they're wrong with what they're entitled to receive, but they were entitled to something that they did not get. They did not get proper guidance when they were younger, when they needed it. And those are the options. If you're a parent, is I'm going to grit my teeth and try to teach this, 7-year-old how to spend his $40 Disney World allowance and beat my head against the wall when he blows it on a raccoon hat. And then for the next 6 days cries about not being able to buy any other new toys. Mm-hmm. And I got to stay disciplined and not buy. I could buy him a new toy and get him to shut the heck up.
Oh, it's way easier.
It's way easier to just go, okay, fine. Here you go. Here's a stupid thing.
Here's another $100.
Here's another $100. Go, leave me alone. Right. Let me hang out with mom. No, that's harder to say, dude. That live with the consequence.
Yeah, enjoy that raccoon hat.
Yeah, but just like people don't want to have those conversations with young children about money, they're not comfortable setting parameters. It becomes bigger problems when we talk about estate planning. People aren't comfortable talking about estate planning topics with their children.
Right. Well, I think there's other reasons for that. People don't want to talk about
there's other reasons, but it's similar in the sense of most of them are simple conversations that just need to happen. They're not complex conversations.
No.
If you ask people why they haven't had the conversation, they'll make it seem like it's really complicated when really you can just pick up the phone, call your kid right now and say, hey, I'm going to give your sister 60% because she's been taking care of your sick and dying mom for the last 10 years. Suck it up.
Right.
That's actually really simple.
Yeah.
It's
I bought
not-
you
I'm
a
not saying
house,
it's
so you're
easy.
getting cut out a little bit on the back end. Right.
I'm not saying it's
whatever it
easy to
is,
say, but it is simple.
Yeah.
What do you see families do that have successful conversations about money and the estate planning development of the older generation?
Well, I think one of them is getting it done. There's a remarkable amount of incomplete estate plans that are out there.
Mm-hmm.
People who just don't do it. Right? And, I would always say, if you don't have a will, you think you don't have a will, but you really do. It's the one that the state has for you and they've got a prescribed hierarchy of where that money goes.
That may not be what you want.
It may not be what you want. And so get your will done. All right. So that's the first sort of decision point. The second is that there are a lot of people who start that path of starting an estate plan and it gets uncomfortable because you're reconciling with the reality of your own demise. And sometimes those decisions, if they aren't easy, people won't make them. So there's an easy decision. Say, I'm going to leave everything to my spouse. My spouse predeceases me. I'm going to leave everything to my kids. Great. Okay. But what's the third level? Oh, well, wait, do I want to leave everything to these grandkids or these are stepkids? Do I want to leave there? Or what if the kids, and then they just stop because they don't want to make those decisions.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to decide on a trust or whatever. I'm going to have this person be my executor. Great. All right. So my spouse is going to be my executor. Well, gee, they predecease me. Who do I want to be my secondary, my contingent successor? I don't know. Should it be my oldest kid? But my oldest kid's kind of a screw up. It should really be my middle kid, but am I going to make them upset? So I just won't do anything. And so a lot of people just stop because the decisions get hard or get difficult. And so that would be if you get with somebody who can guide you through it, an attorney who, not all attorneys are cut the same way, but get one who's going to guide you through it. I've seen a lot of attorneys who just sort of dump it on the client's lap and just
give a bunch of options.
Go away. Yeah, here's too many options.
In my experience, an attorney alone is not the best person to do that.
No.
It should be someone who understands the family dynamics. It should be someone who understands all of the other financial considerations. Of course, a financial advisor is not going to necessarily know all of the legal information necessary to help make those decisions. But if a financial planner isn't present for that conversation, it's likely going to end up costing more money than necessary, probably going to be more complicated than necessary. And that's if it gets done, because I think it's even less likely to get done.
Right.
There's a lot of attorneys, they don't have all that context. They don't know, oh, you actually, for the last 10 years, have told me about that derelict son of yours.
Right. Or you've been supporting kid number 2.
Yeah.
Do you want to account for that?
Yeah.
And maybe back
so
off.
it doesn't get done.
Do you have, speaking of kids and money,
But I make sure that for our clients, I would never put them in a position to talk to an attorney by themselves. We always talk.
yeah, well, you got to fit. Well, you got to make sure you're finishing the process. And a lot of people don't. Do you have situations where people dole out money through the estate over time? Do you see that a lot, or do you just see it all dump out at once, like spendthrift clauses?
Oh yeah,
like
I mean sometimes.
Obviously, if it's a minor, if it's a kid, we were talking about money and kids.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, there you're gonna have a guardian. You're gonna set it up in trust. But
Yeah.
what about adult kids? Do you see?
Yeah, recently I had a family who decided to do that for this is a contingency if they both die before their children reach the age of 35 or something.
Uh-huh.
They're like, well, if they're not 35 yet, we don't want them to get the whole trust, or the whole estate. And so the will is basically, if we both die, it's going to go into a trust. They can receive a minimum distribution of something like $2,000 a month or something, like not enough for them to live off of,
right,
until they're 35, and then when they're 35, they get everything.
Yeah. Did they put other strings attached to it? It's got to be
no.
They got to marry, a nice
funny.
Jewish girl with college education or something like that.
Yeah, a lot of times the topic of trust come up because people hear about it, but they don't necessarily know quite how they work. Right. They just know important people have trust.
Right,
people with money have trust. So I'm important and I have money. I kind of want to explore the trust thing. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell them, like, you can basically, a trust is useful. I may be overly reductionistic, but a trust is useful for something that a will or the probate court can't enforce, right? If your will says, I want to give this money to my son, well, the court, they can just make that happen.
Right.
If the will says, I want to give this money to my son, but only as long as he continues to take care of our daughter.
Yeah.
Well, how are they going to, they can't enforce that. They're not going to really stick around. So you get a trust. Within a trust, you can virtually put whatever constraint you want. And when I present that to people, they'll pretend to brainstorm about it and then end up going like, that's silly.
A friend of mine gave me a good definition. Why you need a trust? He says, you only need a trust if you don't trust.
Yeah.
It's because you want to put those strings and constraints in place because you're not sure how somebody's
Have you seen people put in weird constraints?
I think they talk about it more than it really happens in real life. You always.
Yeah, I don't see it in practice.
I don't see it. I have seen.
I've heard of one. I've heard, and I didn't see this, but I don't know if this is real. It's just what they told me.
Okay.
This is not a client.
All right.
Said that they have a trust, and their kids have to be married before a certain age. I don't remember what it was. It was like, have to be married
before a certain age.
You have to get married before. So if they're not married by the age, it's done. You can't do anything. And let's say it was like 35. So it doesn't matter. You meet the love of your life, 36. You missed your window. You're out forever for a lifetime.
But what if you're 34 and a half and this person's approaching you and you go like, oh, they're just marrying me because they're going to get cut out of the will.
I don't know. Hey, that's up to them. I don't know. And then if they ever get divorced, done forever. And there was something else about it that was ridiculous. Their kids had to go to a certain school too.
God,
the grandkids.
Wow.
So it would pay for the grandkids to go to this school, but no other school.
The only ones I've had first-hand experience is looking at payout provisions over time, rather than giving, and I've seen parents give all the money to one kid and then to the other kid, it comes out over 10 years or 15 years because of the behavior of that kid and how they would react to money.
Yeah. And that's like perfectly legitimate.
Yeah, sure.
That's totally fine. I think the bigger problem is what you talked about earlier when people don't think about it, or they get to a point where they're thinking whether or not I should include a payout provision. And then they get stuck on it.
And then they don't.
And it's back to the 5 key decision framework, the 5 key decisions you have to make to transform wealth to significance. Most people get stuck on the 4th decision, which is
walk through them all.
Decide how I'm going to get there. So the 5 decisions are decide who you are, decide where you are, decide where you're going, decide how you're going to get there. And then lastly, decide who matters. So most decisions that get people stuck up are how. Whether I should include a spendthrift provision, or how long should the spendthrift provision be, right? That's a very detailed how question. Well, there's a lot of decisions that have to be made before you can answer how long the spendthrift provision should be.
Right.
And oftentimes what we're deciding, what this how question is, if we back up all the way to deciding who you are, what's deeply important to you, what are the values and principles you want to guide your life by, what's the ultimate purpose for your life and money, where are you actually understand what resources you have available. 3, where are you going? What do you actually want to happen at the end of all of this in your journey to your ultimate purpose? Then we realize that the decision that was hanging people up in that 4th category, isn't even on the table anymore. Meaning, I'm wondering how long should my spendthrift provision be? And then we back all the way up, make the first 3 decisions and realize you're actually going to do this other trust anyway. You're not even going to have a spendthrift provision. So why would we screw it around?
What do you think was the first decision when you were growing up in family as it relates to money in terms of deciding who we were?
The first decision? What do you mean?
Well,
you mean decide who we are?
as it relates to that, because that's key, right? So if you're going to impart wisdom to kids, right? You're going to help them make better decisions, whether, on whatever it is. You have to decide who you are.
Yeah.
What do you think that was?
Well, the who you are is an identity, and you and Mom did a good job of reinforcing identities that we had as a family. Like these are who the Smiths are. So we had the Smith family principles, which I couldn't recite all of them to you, but I remember several. Honor your father and mother. Don't hit was one principle.
Yeah, don't take other people's stuff.
Don't take other people's stuff. And then there were other, like, maybe not more important, but less brutish ones. Like,
yeah, we had you and your sisters come up with those.
Yeah, well, we all came up with them together.
Yeah,
it was like just how you do it for a company. You don't just tell people what they should be guided by.
Right.
It's collaborative. We had rules for certain areas of life, like that. For the restaurant rules, which I think we've talked about before on the podcast. Inside voice signature, eat your food. Like, we knew Smith family at the restaurant, we are inside voice signature, eat your food.
Right.
And then if we ever pointed out, well, but Dad, Timmy is, running around
like
the Outback Steakhouse, and he's being loud and doing cartwheels. He's not a Smith. You wouldn't even address the fact that, like, that's wrong. His parents should maybe get a hold of. No, you just go, well, he's not Smith, so who cares? Why are you even talking about it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And then another one was Smiths try new things. So whenever we'd go out to a restaurant, if you found something on the menu, you'd ask us, have you ever tried sea urchin or whatever?
Right.
No. Okay, well, gotta order it. No, I don't want to try sea urchin. Smiths try new things.
Yeah.
So that became an identity that we had. When it comes to money, the who we were, maybe there were things that I obviously knew you were a financial advisor. How much of it was something that we did as a family? I don't know.
Well, I think what the identity that I was trying to create was that I didn't want you to be over-resourced, to have money you could just spend without care.
You didn't say, here's maybe somewhat of an answer. I didn't have an identity as a poor kid or a rich kid or anything in between. Like, there was no attachment to an identity of where we were in the socioeconomic status of the world. Like, other kids were different. Like, I remember talking to other kids and they're like, we're poor. Like, and they only know that because my mom says we're poor.
Yeah.
That's how you know that as an elementary school kid. You don't just conclude we're poor or we're rich. There were kids that they knew they were rich. Like, we have money in my family. And I never felt over-resourced. I never felt under-resourced, but I didn't have, I would say part of who we were is to not have an identity or an attachment to money.
Work hard for it, make good responsible decisions with it, and let it get you as a tool on advancing forward. Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So I think what we've learned is I did a good job. Is that what is that? Was that the point of this discussion?
You mean today? You did a good job.
No, I'm just saying overall.
Just, as a dad.
Yeah, I think that's what we.
Well,
I think that's what we learned.
You got to do 2 more podcasts to check up with the others and see how they're doing. But yeah, I think so.
You just made a great decision to listen to this episode of Decidedly. Make another great decision by subscribing to the show and leaving us a 5-star review wherever you're listening. We appreciate the support. It helps business owners like you find our community and defeat bad decision-making in their own lives. For more decision-making insights, check us out at decidedlypodcast.com, on Instagram at decidedlypodcast, or grab a copy of Sanger and Shawn's books from the links in the show notes. Finally, we'd like to thank Shelby Peterson of Transcend Media for editing and post-production of the show. Thanks for listening. I'm Morgan, your producer, and this is Decidedly.